As cold as it may sound, his departure was a relief for everybody. In the midst of these distractions, I still possessed the enthusiasm to reinvent myself. It was difficult to transform my criminal mentality into a mindset with a conscience. Everything was working against me. I was an imprisoned black man condemned to die, co-founder of the infamous and hated Crips, and no one believed I'd ever change. Even I had doubts. I now had knowledge of what not to do. I had studied the lives of numerous imprisoned men who professed to be revolutionists, Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, Rastafarian, ex-drug addict, or former gang member, while still acting out their gangster fantasies. I had read about George Jackson and his comrades, about their courageous attempts to convert the black criminal into the ultimate revolutionary. They were stifled by individuals straddling the fence between revolutionary duties and criminal gain. It would be a harder challenge for me to transfigure my Machiavellian mode to an educated and redemptive mindset. You cannot serve two gods. The recording of human errors must be a vivid reminder of what to avoid repeating. Often during yard time, in my discussions with Tretch and Evil, we warped upon the foreseeable pitfalls and our determination to sidestep them. But despite the books we read, we knew that our life-altering transition had to be based on our own personal initiative, or a relapse would be imminent. Only after undergoing personal transformations could we individually meet at the crossroads to compare notes. Until then, everything we pondered was pure speculation. In the meantime, bad news from the Rolling 60s Crips moved into the cell on the other side of me. He had accidentally cut off his fingers with a saw while working in the prison industry. Luckily, Marin General Hospital, outside the prison, was able to reattach his fingers with reconstructive surgery. It was also around this time that I began to exchange letters and photos with a Puerto Rican female named Rosa. She was an attractive, generous, and intelligent woman who was an expert computer troubleshooter for a large corporation. We slowly developed a cordial relationship, although, judging from her photos, Rosa appeared to be tipsy. No, a sloppy drunk. But I felt self-conscious and hypocritical about questioning her behavior because of my own past, so I tried to be indifferent. I received a missive from Leon Bing, a woman writer working on a book entitled Do or Die. Monster Cody from the A-Trade Gangster Crips had told her about me, and she wanted to learn more about the history of the Crips. I decided to call Leon when Cato's attorney summoned Tretch, Aaron, and me to the Los Angeles County Jail. The first time I met Miss Bing, it struck me as odd that a white woman would be interested in writing a book about street thugs like us. I was skeptical of her motives and was unwilling to divulge the information I planned to use for my memories. Though Leon was congenial enough, I truly believed it impossible for anyone, white, black, Mexican, or other, to chronicle this specific black tragedy when she had not lived it. She would inevitably lack understanding of the essence and subtle contradictions of the Crips' experience. There is already too much misinformation being propagated. I politely suggested at the end of our first and only visit that she talk to Tretch, who might be willing to help her. Perhaps, had I not been expecting a food package already en route to San Quentin, I would have stayed a little longer with Tretch, Cato, and Huron in the county jail. The package I expected was sent by Rosa, who was quite reliable in taking care of my needs. She was impressed with my eagerness to read and provided me with all the books I wanted. From the outside, the relationship appeared to be running smoothly. Evil was curious as to whether I'd marry her. He looked perplexed when I said marriage was out of the equation, period. Dealing with Rosa was a handful. She had issues and wasn't too keen on accepting advice. I knew she had a drinking problem, but I was caught off guard when she admitted that she was a kleptomaniac and had contemplated suicide. Then she mentioned that a psychologist was charging her $250 an hour to discuss her problems. I quipped, $250? Hell, you'd do better paying me to resolve your problems instead of some quack. Each visit was a trying moment for me. I had to determine whether I'd wear the hat of a psychologist, friend, physician, father, counselor, brother, lover, or objective listener. In Rosa's mind, all of her problems far outweighed the seriousness of my execution. Though Rosa was affable and sweet, she was spoiled, expecting everything to go her way. One day Rosa said, "Since I'm looking out for you, Tookie, you can't complain or criticize me." This was our final visit. The materialistic items she rained down upon me were a blessing, but I wasn't hard up enough to kiss anybody's butt for them. To relieve my pent-up frustration, I started doing burpees with Evil on the yard. Within months, burpees became an enjoyable challenge to test my endurance and strength. Pushing the envelope, I created other higher count burpees, along with double, triple, and other quad count Jashiri burpees with the pause and crunch burpees. Though the burpee routine started off with just Evil and me, others began to join in. Before long, the entire yard was, in prison parlance, busting down. Even Mario, a blood, participated in our routines and didn't miss a workout. His presence on the yard was no oddity, because Crips and Bloods had been coexisting under the same roof for years, on death row, with no serious conflict. But of course, with a bunch of men playing basketball, there are bound to be disagreements. On the basketball court one day, I saw out of the corner of my eye a flashing silhouette, a hand going inside little man's head. On the basketball court one day, I saw out of the corner of my eye a flashing silhouette, a hand going upside little man's head. He and Mario squared off to fight. I stood between them, demanding to know what the problem was. Mario spat out, "Tookie, this dude little man has been dogging me ever since I've been on the yard." Mario spat out, "Tookie, this dude little man has been dogging me ever since I've been on the court." I told him, "I'm no chump," and stopped dogging me, but he kept doing it, so I popped him. Pulling Mario to the side, I asked, was he willing to fight little man head up, and he quickly responded, yes. However, when I asked the bigger and more muscular Crip, little man, about fighting Mario, he responded, "Can you have somebody make a knife for me?" Disgusted, I said, "Hell no, this is a simple fight with no knives. So either you fight him toe to toe or not at all." Only later did I realize that at that moment I initiated the beginning stage of fair play fighting. It made no difference to me that Mario and Little Man were gang rivals. Each deserved equal footing in the fight. Imagine me, developing the conscience, and with the blood, a sworn enemy of what I stood for. Years previously, things would have turned out entirely different with the free-for-all. But my decision for judicious even-handedness was a response that earned Mario's and Little Man's respect. This was a bad time for the disenfranchised. California's criminal judiciary was handing out the death penalty like government food stamps in a depression. A youngster from the Linwood Crips, Kerm, had just driven up from the county jail and was immediately placed in the hole with us. His first day on the yard, I watched as he cautiously surveyed the territory and us. Kerm was a slender Crip with barely suppressed rage. I was impressed with his gung-ho attitude toward exercising and studying. Soon, Chico from the A-Tray Gangster Crips arrived. He too was thrown in the hole for evaluation. Both he and Kerm had to remain in the hole until the committee determined whether or not they would receive grade A status. During a chat with Chico, I discovered he lived just several blocks from where I had lived on 69th Street. He was one of the many youngsters, along with Monster Cody, who sat around gawking at my homeboys and me driving iron. Chico was now taller than me and quite muscular. I could sense his fiery spunk, but more important, Chico had a penchant for study and exercise. Occasionally, I'd cross paths with the Crip with something to hide, such as the case with Adabanga from the Long Beach Crips, who had been on death row for a few years. He seemed to have a huge chip on his shoulder ever since Gangster attacked him for calling him a punk. As he and I strolled on the yard, Adabanga voiced his disagreement with the rule for exercising. I'd assured him there was no obligation to exercise. Apparently, Adabanga mistook my humility for weakness. He blurted, "I hope we don't have to hurt anybody over this exercising thing, because I will." Ordinarily, I would have clipped his chin without a second thought, but I only stopped and warned him about his hostility. Somebody might take as a threat. His response was, "I don't care." His hand flinched upward, perhaps as a nervous tick or an attempt to strike. I defended myself with a slap across his face that sounded with a sharp crack. He stood there shocked. One of the gunmen heard the slap and ordered us to stand still. He told Adabanga to walk toward the cage entrance. As he passed, he made a half-hearted attempt to swing in slow motion from 8 feet away. Standing nearby, Evil took this gesture as aggression against me. He rushed the much larger Adabanga inside the caged area. It was natural for Evil to retaliate on my behalf, as it was for Tretch and me to run from opposite sides of the yard to assist him. The other gunman fired a shot, landing inches from my foot. I met Trek shoulder to shoulder at the entrance of the cage. It was impossible for all of us to fight inside the tight space. Evil continued his attack as Atabanga pleaded with him to stop. At that time, none of us was aware that Atabanga had snitched on his crime. The incident triggered a 10-day lockdown at San Quentin. By then, I started corresponding with another female, Benita, a fitness instructor from Los Angeles. Ever since I've been on death row, I envisioned one day meeting a beautiful sister with a huge afro and her fist raised high in a symbolic gesture of black power, or at least meet a woman who looked black. Benita was a Caucasian with fiery red hair, the antithesis of my ideal woman, but she was responsive to me, more than willing to help. I've often questioned why there are so many black men in the visiting room hooked up with white women. I have come to understand that there is a paucity of sisters willing to come visit black men behind bars. But white women, especially those from foreign countries, visit black men in large numbers. And behind these walls, when compassionate assistance comes knocking, as it rarely does, you simply open the door.